Hey everybody, we'll give everybody a couple of more minutes to join here. Um, I'm hoping Jeff will also be here and maybe Helia. Okay, I think we can probably go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have a couple of items on the agenda for this meeting. And again, sorry, sorry for all my trouble in the past couple of meetings. I'm not sure when was I can't remember the last time. I think it was on the call last time. I don't remember. Anyway, um, I have been traveling a lot. I'll actually be we don't have a meeting next week, but I'll actually be at the Chiplet Summit next week for those that are attending. I think I'm giving a quick talk on the link in the in the tutorial section about the link layer. Pretty much slides that either I presented before or Jeff has presented before, and just kind of putting a slightly different spin on them, but pretty much all the same content. So if you've seen those before at the OCP summit or something like that, it's pretty much a rehash. Um, so I got a couple of things on the agenda here. So first up, we had a discussion in the Flexi working group last week. And then I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about um, Flexi and the link layer. Um, I guess the one topic that came up was um, our existing link layer over Flexi and whether that would also be possible. And I made a quick point on the Flexi call about how some of the signaling in Flexi makes some of the link layer things some of the it basically makes the link layer itself um, redundant in some cases here. So really the magic ends up being in the transaction layer, and the link layer can be either be shortcutted, reduced or eliminated in some aspects. So the primary thing here is about the frame signal, which we have on our sideband as well. Pretty much does everything that the link layer, the LOP does for us. Because the LOP basically just gives you it basically just communicates where the um, TLP delineations are and where which granules the headers are in, but you get that same information from the frame signal itself. So there's not really, so basically if anybody wants to map any TLP enabled buses to Bo Flexi, they can pretty much just map the TLP directly itself. You have all the information that you need um, to delineate what a TLP is from the frame signal itself. I think there are some additional questions we would need to answer if we actually did a mapping like that. Um, Namely, what alignments we support, what you do when you have alignments that don't match, that kind of thing. And then you still have, uh, well, I mean, it's fairly obvious, but you still have ordering you have to define. Um, but the actual link part of that is functionally a no op. Um, it's just the granular ordering. Does that make sorry? Does that make sense to everybody? What I'm saying here?
I think so. The frame signal, when there's no data to be transmitted, it just stays stable, or it, I haven't looked at the details of the sideband.
Uh, for Bowflexy, I need to read more into the spec. I started skimming
Mhm.
it, but I haven't had enough time since last week to really give it my all. My assumption would be, yeah, something like that. It either stays low or it requires a pulse or something like that.
What happens on the sideband? Because I think they're just leveraging the sideband.
The sideband, the frame is basically just an enable. So
Okay.
when frame is high, the bits are valid. When frame is low, it's not valid.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that's an encoding of the LLP header, right? But
Yeah, you don't need the LOP header anymore.
yeah. Okay. But yeah, I would agree that it is redundant with that. And then they have a length, right? That they're specifying the size of the message they're sending.
Well, that's the thing. So right now they have their own the Bowflexy has its own link layer to a degree, right?
Mhm.
For transmitting data. But they have other you can specify other link types, right? And I guess my proposal in this is that you would specify or there's an undefined type, I think. But basically you use one of those to say it's not the Bowflexy specified link layer, it's something else. And then basically it's a TLP. But then that goes into our whole
Yeah.
stack of documentation you have to have in order to define that.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say it looks a little bit like the message proposal, where you have a length there. Um, I think, yeah, they're transmitting an address, but I mean, their payload could be different, but just a message with a length and a type, a TLP type, it looks kind of similar. But
For their link layer. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's not as simple as our sideband, but it's like the next step up.
Yeah, well, I kind of see it as like they're defining a bunch of message types, right? That they're sending. And we would typically map those to TLPs.
Well, we don't have to map theirs. I mean, like they have their own thing
Yeah.
for that. Um, again, their link layer is focused on efficiency, not
Mhm.
transmitting additional information. Our link layer is focused on simplifying hardware integration by providing a direct path for SOC disaggregation, right? So if you don't want to make a bridge and you don't want to make any sacrifices in signals, right?
Mhm.
That's what the link layer is for. And so that's what our link layer is for. That you could, in theory, make something more and more not tied to a standard and not tied to those signaling and do it fairly efficiently as well. But I guess the point here is that if for some reason or another, right, you really don't want to use their um, direct memory mapped um, protocol that doesn't match anything else directly, you wanted to use AXI or whatever the case may be, there's a quick and easy path to map those signals onto Bowflexy if you wanted to do that. And so that's all I'm talking about, I think. So it's not a replacement of what they have already.
Okay. And
And I guess back to one of your conversations on email,
mhm.
I guess some Bowflexy interfaces can get reasonably wide. right? I think when I was originally thinking about this and talking, I was, mostly going towards the low performance, which I think was what I think the gravity is like it's a handful of wires. It's less than eight, something like that, right? But you can
Mhm.
go up to 16 or so, right? Or I guess
No,
actually,
you go up to 1024 is what he's defined in Bowflexy.
oh, there you go. So if you wanted to do something ultra wide, and
Mhm.
for some reason you wanted to do um, like again you're doing SOC disaggregation and you just want to put a bus across the link. This
Mhm.
is a It's kind of a quick and easy way to handle it as well.
Yeah, I
Uh,
don't know if the message types that they've defined would work well in that wider interface, but anyhow. Um,
no, 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 no. What I'm saying is
yeah.
for our use case, if we're mapping TLPs
Mhm.
directly to Bowflexi,
Mhm.
and you're okay having a wide interface, it actually makes more sense in that situation. You do run into a problem where if the interface is wider than the TLP, how do you handle that situation? But
Yeah.
and you do the TLPs need to be aligned to the interface, I think. I guess they don't have to, but I think that's what we would probably want to stipulate for the vast majority of people to keep it simple.
Mhm. Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd need some other way we would need the LLP header if we didn't align them, I guess would be the
Mhm.
outcome of that, right?
Yeah.
Because you'd need to define where the TLP header is in the middle of a very wide interface.
Yeah. So I guess there's two ways of thinking about interaction with Bowflexy is just running the link layer over a Bowflexy phi or taking the message types that are defined in Bowflexy and transmit them over whatever phis we have linkages to in the spec, right?
You
Otherwise,
mean bridging to their link layer?
well, I just say I'm looking for the interaction between the Bowflexy stuff and the link layer specification. Is there any kind of
Well, I think there's a couple of places.
mm,
So one would be what we just mentioned. You basically put the link layer over Blueflexi, and that's assuming that basically Bowflexi is your main band. Like there's not another main band in this scenario.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
the other option here is that there is another main band, and Bowflexi is your sideband, or it's your management interface, or something like that, and you would like to run our link control protocol over Bowflexi.
Mhm,
And given our link control protocol is just memory mapped registers, there's really no reason you couldn't do that. You can do that with their existing link layer that's in the Bowflexi spec as well. I think the only problem would be addresses because um, you know we made the assumption in the link control protocol spec that nothing else is really. I mean, there's a lot of register space there to add anything else, but it's that register space is not meant to be a system register space. It's meant to be an isolated register space.
mhm,
And so all of the link IDs and stuff like that assume that you're just kind of taking up all those addresses for things like that, and there's not other things that we have to accommodate. Obviously, there's plenty of register space for expansion, but it potentially collides. So if you're going to be mapping this link control protocol onto something that potentially has a much larger address space, then you have to solve those issues. Much like the discussion in the systems group this week with Open Chiplet Atlas. Uh, you know, uh,
mhm,
Figuring out colliding address spaces between different standards is always problematic.
mhm.
Um, but
Well,
but yeah, yeah. So and then I think the other option here is again, Bowflexi is your main band. You are using their link layer, and in those cases, right, if you're doing SOC design or whatever, you're just bridging to whatever bus that shows on the outside of that controller, and our link layer doesn't really play in that scenario.
Um, well, I think it can, just like we map payloads of different protocols. You could take this Bowflexy message format and just map it onto a TLP. But I'm wondering if
Oh,
if we do want to consider, some kind of interaction here, if their phi is based on the sideband, the link sideband that we've defined in the TLL, we could look at how would you transmit the link protocol over a sideband interface, and then they could just leverage that if
I'm
they
sorry.
want.
I don't think I'm following you. Say, can
Well,
you?
from what I understand from the Bowflexy discussion is that they were trying to reuse the sideband that
Yeah,
you.
it follows some of our rules. It
Mhm.
has some of our, again, I need to review I've
Yeah.
only kind of really briefly skimmed it. And I need to go do some more work on it. But it uses some of our rules, some of our behaviors, right? From
Mhm.
a slow slide band control interface kind of behavior. But the packet format's different, right? They're more flexible and more efficient. Um, Again, given our focus is on really slow
Yeah.
register writes over a very long period of time, and their focus is on actual, operational CSRs back and forth. And so we it has some of the same behavior, but the packet format is not compatible.
Right. So I would say put the packet format aside, but just look at the physical layer that they're going over and how
Uh-huh.
it differs from sideband, and maybe try to resolve those differences and then work on how you get a link layer over the sideband. And
Layer over
then
the sideband.
and
So
then you have at some point, how do you take their packet formats and translate them to TLPs?
okay, so on the first part, I think whether you're using what is your goal here? Is you're using Bowflexy as the sideband, or you're talking about just or basically consolidating
Yeah.
sideband and Bowflexy?
Yeah, right now it feels like Bowflexy is an independent protocol physical layer.
It is.
And I think they're trying to build off of the sideband definition. So the first thing I would just say is,
Yeah, but physically
so
they're not the same. I mean, they're I think our sideband is a very very simple. I mean, it's bow sideband, right? And we're just writing a link layer on top of bow sideband. Bow sideband is much simpler, I think, than bow flexi, from my understanding. Like that, I think, and maybe Matt or somebody can correct me here, but my understanding was that bow flexi is still using a bow phi. And so bow sideband does not use a bow phi. I think it's just slow IO on bow sideband. So I think there's still a difference there. And I think even from my understanding, bow flexi can come up without training, but can speed up or something like that.
mhm,
Again, I need to go look at that. I haven't really read it in detail. So there's a physical difference here. They're not physically compatible at all. I
yeah.
think where the only thing that they're using that's from our perspective is, some of the signaling stuff, like the frame signal. But the frame signal has been borrowed from, I mean, we didn't define the frame signal either. That was
Yeah.
defined in both sideband. And Alad basically, I talked to Alad about this, and he says, "Yeah, I just made a frame signal that anybody can just use for whatever they feel like." So we came up with a very simple interpretation of what frame means, which is somewhat intuitive and obvious. And then it sounds like Bowflexy basically just used the same definition. But I mean, it's not an invention or anything, I'm not sure it really gives us any kind of synchronization between these standards.
Well, I think why it looks why it might be interesting is, I think Bowflexy kind of started from this idea of UCIe 3D, where you have a very wide synchronous interface.
Hmm.
Um, and so if we find a way to bridge to it, then I think there's a bridge to, and maybe we start with UCIe 3D or something, is a better path. But I think those sort of chiplet integrations in the future could be interesting. Um, and
Sure. I mean,
there's some
I don't
people
disagree.
that are talking about applying that specification to 2.5D packaging, right? Just at lower
Okay.
speeds. So,
I don't know enough about UCIe 3D to comment on that either way. I
mhm,
think from our perspective with the existing link layer spec right now, I think it's a pretty I think we can make a mapping just like the UTLL has for UCIe.
yeah.
I think we can make a mapping to Bowflexy with very little effort. Um,
Mhm.
Basically, like I said, basically just using the frame signal as the LP. But and so there's a couple of things we have to specify. So it would be a relatively short chapter in order to do that in our spec. I think that the question then, oh, so I guess from the Bowflexy point of view, I guess the question is that enough? Is there something else that we're missing there?
Yeah.
And then from your point of view, can that be leveraged for other standards? And honestly, I don't know enough about UCA 3D or anything on that lines, whether
Yeah.
that changes there. Because again, the only reason that it's so easy with Flowflexy is because of the signaling and because we're familiar with it. It doesn't.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know enough about UCA 3D to say if that is the case. I mean, for our UCIe, we're just using raw FDI, right? We're not even getting down to the signaling level from our perspective. Does that change with UCIe 3D? Does FDI look the same?
I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
I haven't I mean, honestly I don't know how much is public there too, so I don't even know if I had read the spec if I could talk about it.
yeah, yeah. I'd have to go look at the spec to see where it's at, but I'm assuming it kind of would leverage FDI, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah. So given where I mean, assuming it uses FDI, I mean that's our mapping point right now, and
Mhm.
the question would be whether it makes any sense to do anything lower than that for UCI 3D. I think we can table that and
Yeah, but I mean, it is
figure out what we
clear
can
that
actually talk about.
it is clear that Bowflexy introduces this frame signal, right? So you do have to translate the LLP into those frame to generate the frame signal. And then the question is, do you transmit the LLP header or do you drop that out of the stream? So there's
Yeah,
some interesting aspects there to go look at.
right.
So
Like I said, I think it's pretty obvious, but I think there's no reason not to look at it
yeah,
harder and make sure that we make the right decision there.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Next thing up. Oh, ratification. So we've been done with 1.2 for a while, but I just found out last week that, well, number one, we can't the way they do publications here in OCP is kind of frustrating. So originally when we were started this, we started the 1.2 as a separate spec, or we started sideband as a separate spec. And then we were told, hey, you need to combine these specs, otherwise you go through a world of hurt, and signatures and illegal in order to add a new spec. So we're like, okay, well, they go together anyway, so there's no reason to not just make the sideband a chapter in the link layer spec. And so that's what we did. And then I have found out, last week or so, when so Anu was told me to go present to the OCP final board for approval that in order to present to the final board, you have to have donated the spec as a contribution. Um, and I apparently that's a whole thing. I haven't had a chance to go through the training on the website yet, and I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to do that. And I'm a little unclear on exactly what kind of signatures are needed for that. Because my understanding originally was that the whole reason we were doing, it as an iteration is because we wouldn't have to go through another approval thing because it would be the same approval as 1.0. Because there really weren't, well, it's a little fuzzy on exactly who has been contributing because a lot of people that contributed and then left their companies or are now at different companies and things like that. So exactly who would need to sign, I think there's a big question as well too. So until I go through some training and figure out exactly what kind of signature process we have to do for this, or who actually donates the spec, because like for a single contributor, it's obvious, right? I assume for when Ventana did UTLL, it was, you're just contributing your spec that you wrote. But for the link layer, it is definitely multiple people that have been adding to this for over a course of years. Um, exactly what signatures we need, I think, is potentially a non-trivial thing to sort out. So that's something we'll need. And their preference is that multiple companies contribute the spec together. And so sorting all of that out, I don't know. I may need some help on. So anyway, I need to go eventually watch some video, take a training or something like that on this and figure out um, some sort of list of operations that need to actually contribute our existing 1.2 spec into OCP rather than it just sitting in a Google Drive somewhere. And then once it's actually contributed and shows up as a list item in the database, then I can present it to the board. But honestly, I don't know what happens at that point because once it's in the database, it's sitting there. What does the board do other than marketing? Um, anyway, I think that's something I'll need to sort out going forward. Again, hoping Helia or someone else could have been on to help with these things. So I think she hasn't been on in quite a while, so I'm not sure she's really in the group anymore at the moment. Um, anyway, that's where we are on ratification. Honestly, by the time we get this sorted, we may have more to add to the spec. So I guess I don't know if we're
You don't envision the sideband to be broken out. It's still going to be within the spec, the tail of the spec.
I mean, we've already, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bunch of effort to break it back out at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I
But,
mean, yeah, I mean, we could do it either way. It's just how much tech writing effort do you want to put into it?
no, right. But you're not being asked to do that. So,
No,
okay.
no,
It's
I
just a
don't.
matter of, who needs to sign a licensing agreement for the release of the spec.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Do I
Okay.
need to get all of the people that signed the original
Yeah.
1.0, which many of which haven't been in the group in a while, or do I need to get just the people that contributed text for 1.2? Or again, given some of those people aren't in the group anymore, do I need to get who do this is all on audio record, right? So if somebody contributed something in the call, there's a record of it both in Google Drive and in the call. There's a giant legal and signature question here that exactly what I need to do, and I'm gonna have to do a bunch of research or ask a bunch of people about what the appropriate thing is to do.
Yeah, I think you definitely need to go follow up on that. But from what I understand, stuff that's shared verbally on the call is just open. It's public. It's only when you contribute, written portions of the spec or whatever that you need to sign a licensing agreement. So, but go figure that out.
Yeah, yeah.
Have fun with
Well,
it.
I mean, the spec editor has changed 3 or 4 times, since 1.0, right? So I mean, it was Boppy for a while, and then it was ROM wrote a large portion of it, et cetera, et cetera. And um, those both ROM and Boppy haven't been on a call for like a year. ROM, I think, was probably on like 6 months ago, but they both have changed companies potentially several times in Boppy's case since they contributed. So what does that mean from a signature point of view? I don't even know. So that's something I'll have to go do some ask around about. But again, uh, there's records of everything what people put in one way or another. So it's not it's not a mystery from that perspective. It's just a mystery on the signatures. Okay. And then finally, making progress on link layer 2.0. Um, you know, Jeff, we have your feature list. I'm actually um, working with internal teams right now at my company to make sure that there's nothing else that people want to propose here or they think would be helpful. Again, I don't. There's a couple of minor details I think we're still sorting out on some of those items. We were talking about messages, I think, last time, but um, we need to make sure that there's what else we want to do here. Um, like, for instance, we were just talking about Bow Flexi. Since we're already talking about adding a mapping to UCIe in 2.0, basically incorporating UTLL, are there other um, mappings that we need to consider other than do we want to consider Bow Flexi in 2.0 as well? Uh, again, it's probably a pretty quick chapter, so it's probably not that big of a deal if we want to incorporate that. Um, but I don't know if there's anything else. You mentioned UCIe 3D. That's something we should probably take a look at real quick to see if anything changes between normal UCIe and anything else there. But
And for that, I would seek input from Cash, see what he's thinking.
what
Yeah,
group is Cash leading? I know I've seen him on calls, but I don't know what his
I,
function is.
I don't know what he's. I know the technology he's working on. He might be interested in a linkage to 3D
Ah, okay,
or to Bowflexi. So he might have some skin in the game there.
okay. Write that down. Um, yeah. So I think just finalizing our final list of everything that we're going to incorporate into 2.0 makes a lot of sense. And then we'll need to figure out. I think we have a good list of things that are potentials here. Um, from a tech writing point of view, before I add anything into our perspective 2.0 spec, I do need to reorganize the whole spec. Um, we have lots of things that are in their own chapters uh, in the Google Doc that um, are all very Bow specific. And if we're going to be breaking out new mappings into, if we're breaking out new mappings, then each of those chapters actually needs to be a a subheading within a specific mapping chapter, right? So we need to talk about um, pretty much all of the link layer stuff separately for each of those. Now they can all inherit, right? You can say just see um, Bow, uh, see the Bow subchapter on this particular topic for basic information. We're just changing this. That's fine. But the organization of the doc and how things are kind of worded, basically assuming no other link layers exist, all has to be kind of edited down. And that's actually probably quite a bit of work. So I need to figure when I'm going to get that figured out. But what in parallel we can kind of break each of the individual items up into individual proposals that are then kind of roughing out what kind of changes they make to the spec. And so you can go in there and do those edits as part of sub individual proposals. Uh,
And I guess the goal in terms of time frame is to make it by the global summit so you can present there. Or
uh, Is that October? I can't remember when that is.
October, yeah.
Maybe. Um, I think it's possible we get it done
Yeah.
by October.
Yeah.
Um,
You probably want to be done hopefully before that so that at least it's an accepted contribution. We'll probably have a stronger message than if it's not, but you could probably get by with it being approved later.
um, I mean, if push comes to shove, I think some sort of draft by then would probably be fine. A draft out where, we have a open draft for review or something like that at Global Summit. Please give us your comments. I think that would be something that would be fine as well. Um, Not sure we have to push to get it all because the changes are pretty big. I don't expect there's a whole lot of implementations of 1.0 out there to really argue with us about, us breaking things.
Mhm.
But um, at the same time, it's still probably, it's a good goal either way. Um, yeah, I don't know. Again, squeezing in all the tech writing time, I think is the biggest hurdle.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So let's hold on, let me pull up my notes here. Yeah. So I think again, I think a lot of our stuff's kind of spread out over between your slides and emails. I think, um,
I think
I
it
think,
should be all on the drive, everything that we've discussed in the past. I don't think anything's really changed.
well, I think we discussed some changes to some of your items
Mhm.
um, in emails and on calls. And I don't think we've actually captured that in
Yeah.
your slideware. I think there's not like a separate document for any of the discussions. So I think um, assuming I get chance
Mhm.
between the travel that I have coming up, um, I think I'd like to break out each of your individual proposals into
Mhm.
a separate slide or two slides for each one, and then discuss, what our current thoughts are for, our discussions, like what our group consensus is there, and whether we have agreed on any kind of, modifications or changes or details. Because there's a couple of these things that need some additional
Mhm.
details and a couple of bullets. And then I don't know. I'd say vote on them or something, but we don't typically have enough um, attendance to make it not something that needs to be unanimous anyway. So I think we can just make sure and just ratify them amongst ourselves in terms of like which proposals we think make the most sense. Make enough sense to try for integration into the document. And then maybe some, what text is affected and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um, Going through and looking at your existing list, uh, and this is a little out of date, but okay. Um, so I think again, still some discussion here. I think on the the type width. I think we still need to have, but
Mhm.
I think for trying, I need. This is the whole reason we need to break these things out because I don't remember all the discuss. I'd have to go back and find all the discussion. I think for TOP start, that was the thing I was looking for. Um, I think we had some progress here in refining this a bit. Um, I think we can make a more definitive proposal for exactly what this new header format looks like,
Mhm.
um, and and make it a little bit. a little bit simpler. And it also needs to be aligned to because we don't really talk about the new LLP size here either. And so this needs to be aligned with that as well. So again, these need to be, again, there's a whole email on it. So we have the text. It just needs to be broken out and presented as a separate item.
Mhm.
The credit fields, I think, are kind of the same way. I think we got relative consensus on this, but we need to break this out into a separate item as well. Um, Messaging, I don't think we ever actually got to the point where we talked about this a lot. Um, I think my feedback is probably I don't have a big horse in the messaging race, but we probably want to talk about. I mean, you were talking about synchronizing this a little bit more with MCTP, right?
No, I don't. Well, the yeah, making sure that it covers messaging as was defined in the UCIe spec. I don't know if that gets to, particular protocols.
Well, the UCIe
MCTP.
spec is just MCTP, right?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, well, I guess it's probably a little more flexible than that, but that's pretty much the only implementation I've ever heard them talk about is MCTP.
Yeah. So I was just
Or
trying to make sure to cover that. I think it covers probably what's in OpenChiplet Atlas. And then the question is, could it cover Flexi if that's of interest to try to look at those packets?
so talking about OCA real quick, my
Hmm.
understanding is that is all memory mapped from the discussion we had yesterday. Were you on that call yesterday?
That was on part of it, yeah.
So it sounded like their sideband, which is basically I3C, is just memory mapped.
Hmm.
And um, I'm not sure we would need to transmit any messages for that
Hmm.
because it's on that sideband. It's always in that sideband. It sounds like it's a separate address space that's static,
Hmm.
and there's no additional things here. Now, again, just because you're doing that doesn't mean there's not a need for a messaging to happen
Yeah.
too, because there's a lot of other high bandwidth stuff you would do over sideband that messages could take. Um, I guess the question would be: is there other use cases for messages that we're not handling, or we're not thinking of here that makes sense? Other standards out there, like for instance, is there anything that's like MCTP for like MCTP or whatever, but for any kind of specific telemetry or whatever that we need to accommodate as well?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess I'm trying to think of, but ARM does telemetry pretty much through AXI stream, if I remember correctly. So they would probably just do a bus map. Um, I can't think of anything else right now, but this is probably a Google search we probably need to double check with and make sure that and if there's any other payload sizes that make sense. But to your specific proposal here,
Mm-hmm.
um, again, I think the proposal here is that there's a short and long message, right?
Yeah, one that you can interrupt. The long messages you can interrupt, but the short have to complete. So if you want to send a lot of data over the link, you don't want to tie up the link to that message. So if you can break those into segments, they can be interrupted. And then you would have a short message that you could send while there's an outstanding long message being sent.
So how do you interrupt?
How do you interrupt? When you send, I'm trying to remember. I think when you send a new message with a TLP start set to one.
You mean the other side? So one side is in the process of sending a message, and the other side sends a message, and it stops the current message from the.
No,
Are you saying interrupting from the
controller
sender
has
from?
control over that, right?
Oh,
How it
you
wants to
mean
schedule the messages.
I get you. I get you. Okay. So would it be better to we already talked about like continuation bits and stuff like that, right? I think we you eliminated, I think, in your proposal here, but for a while we had a continuation bit. Does it make more sense to put a continue? Oh, you already
There
have a
is a
continuation bit.
continue bit. Yeah, there's a single bit for that.
So what would be if you had a short with with a continue? It's the same as a long, though, right?
If you sent hmm, oh, so it's just with the long messages. While you're sending the payload there, if a TLP gets scheduled, another TLP with a TLP start gets scheduled, that can interrupt that long message. And then when you resume that long message, you're coming back with a message continue bit set. So you know that it's part of the long message rather than the short, than a short message.
I see. Hmm.
And I guess what I meant to say is this material, from my perspective, I didn't have any changes to it, but certainly it's a good starting point. You can break it out however you want, and run the discussions from this point, come up with alternate solutions.
Yeah, I don't know. I got to think about that some more. Okay. Yeah.
And the LLP size is it's encoded in this TLP start field that it's 23 bits. So that tells you that the LLP size is 24 bits, 24 slots or TLPs.
But what was the agree? What was the? I get to refresh my memory. We talked about a different size, right?
Yeah, it's defining the LLP header. I went and took a look at a lot of different things, and it seemed like if you do, we're at 16 now, we could go up to 24 bits or 24, I'm just going to call them slots. Um, that the complexity of that doesn't seem too onerous. If you wanted to kind of fill up all the available bits in the LLP header, um, so it was like an odd size, maybe like 26 TLP slots or 27, then it starts to get really complicated. And so that's why it seemed like 24 slots was a good trade-off point. To fill up that LLP header with usable data, which gives you efficiency, overall efficiency, reduces the overhead of the LLP header, and yet was a reasonable complexity in the controller. So that left over some bits, and so this 2-bit TLP um, size indicator would allow you potentially to change those slots from being just 1 granule to 2, 4, 8 granules.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether that makes sense or not, I don't know. Yeah. Or if we find another good use for the bits.
Okay. Let me like I said, I think I have a lot that we have broken out in the email. Let me break each of these out into individual things to talk about and recapture all the stuff that we did from the email into slideware. Um, okay. All right. Does anybody else have any other items we need to hit in 2.0 we can think of? Again, all the stuff I think that Jeff has here, it's all focused on efficiency, on getting higher bandwidth for a given set of transmitted bits. And in fact, it's actually more focused on um, it's focused on bigger use cases as well, right? The higher LLP, the higher it's focused on I wouldn't say hyperscaler per se. though I guess the whole group is. But it's definitely pushing more towards that aspect. Do we feel like we're missing anything here?
I would just add a few things, like try to make the CRD, the credit message and the message, more usable or mm, more flexible from a standpoint. So that does work towards efficiency, I think. The other thing I think we talked about was the CRD, whether, having two sets of seven credit fields or, four of, four sets. I think is
Right.
another thing we discussed, and, I'm
Yeah.
fine with four
And
sets, but yeah.
yeah, more sets and more and again, I
And
think back to the typing issue, more
yeah,
space for types.
yeah.
But the yeah, but I think the credit thing is a fallout from our change to the header. 'Cause I feel like the main reason that the credits were in the header before was because of the limitation of the types of only one type of packet per LLP, right? So you can deliver multiple credit packets now in a given LLP, and so if you needed to spend those bits however you wanted in order to deliver more credits back, you're free to do that now with the new definition. And so it's less of an issue of having to deliver the credits as a sideband signal, basically.
Yeah, I think we kind of pushed the crediting into the TLP definitions or types, but I think if you think about it, it's really the mix of TLP types that you have on an interface. That creates a group of credits. So this was working towards, well, let's just make those credit fields in the credit TLP to be general in nature and be able to map to those whatever is needed on the interface, right?
Right.
And it makes it, I guess, a more standardized mechanism rather than each TLP type defining how are going to behave. I mean, I still can a little bit now, but at least the whole framework in which you communicate these credits is would be similar or unified.
Can you so my understanding is credits would still work the same. It's just the delivery of the credits that's the
Yeah,
what's changing, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And then in terms of the type size, I guess the one thing to think about is if you're if the number of types that you need is being driven by copies of the same protocol, I'm wondering if it makes sense to have kind of virtual channel, like you just have a type per protocol you're sending. You define that type for each unique type of protocol you're sending, and then you have some kind of virtual channel field or index of which bus you're driving on either side. And that might be a way to reduce the number of types, but I think you had a use case, and I'm not sure what was driving the number of types that you thought you needed to go wider on that field.
Yeah. So the reason that I want more types, so right now we have 16, right? Basically 4 bits.
Mm-hmm.
So in your proposal, and we're coming down from 6 bits. And the reason that I wanted more types is just because of the initial goal of the standard was SOC disaggregation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for in some SOCs, you end up with separate buses that do different quality of different things for you potentially have a lot of narrow buses doing work that are all segregated for security and QoS and a variety of reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't have enough types to track all of those, then I have to do some sort of aggregation, which kind of breaks the whole point of having those separate. And yeah, in my use case, absolutely, there were multiple buses of the same types. That doesn't necessarily mean some would implement them that way in their SOC. Like, it doesn't just because I have three AXI buses doesn't mean that the next guy doesn't have an AXI, a tile link, and who knows what else. So my point is, and those types is that it's very easy to eat up um, a handful of types with one bus, right, going in one direction.
Mhm.
And so, AXI is like four, right? So if you're just talking about AXI buses, yes, you've four buses is your max. And so, um, for a standards whose focus is on SOC disaggregation and matching the needs of the user, it just seems like it seemed like an unnecessary restriction, um, and crippling in some ways, because if you don't have those bits in that right place, then you have to treat them. You have to treat your situation as different than everybody else's, which seemed, it's possible, right? But you have to deal with it at a different layer, right? You have to parse a different header, et cetera, et cetera, where
Yeah.
it makes a lot more sense just to have one extra bit or two extra bits. It's just not a very high penalty in my belief. Those two
Mhm.
extra bits.
Okay.
Right. So, all right. So like I said, I think we've run out of time here. I think hopefully for next call, I'll try and separate these out, and I'll try and capture some of the stuff that we've done in email, and then we can try and um, take each of the individual items on individual slides and start breaking those out into text that we would then incorporate into the spec and try and get some agreement on too. And then maybe it'll make it a little more easy when I'm done with the other tech editing stuff, to edit the stuff into the spec itself too. Do you guys have an opinion on whether we should? Oh, never mind. I was going to say we could know what do we attack these things in, but I think like from a spec change point of view, all of this stuff kind of all it's pretty obvious where it kind of breaks in the existing spec, and the other stuff we're talking about here for like other physical layer mappings, those all pretty much break out into subchapters anyway, and they're almost standalone, as the UTLL spec kind of shows. It's its own thing and probably would just be added in a kind of not as is, but it is kind of standalone. And I would assume any other mappings like Flexi or whatever would also be somewhat standalone as chapters. Anyway, so we can discuss this separately. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. If you're going to be at the Chiplet Summit, swing by. I think there's a couple of birds of a feather or whatever groups that are going to be set up, one for FCSA and stuff like that. I'm not sure where we need one for the link layer, but please hit me up if you want to have a chat.
Yeah.
Catch you
Thanks.
guys later.
Yep.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.